Is he well?
Good day, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 175. Let me just do my little bit of boom attack here. Yes, there we go. Good evening to my guest Salomon and to Mitch. I have invited AI as well, but I don't know if he's going to be able to make it. We'll see. What mainly this evening, we're obviously going to be talking about the general election and Farage and Farage's return. Before we did that, I just wanted to give a bit of an update on Sam Melia, who is basically a political prisoner in Britain, so far as I'm concerned. Due to a huge public outcry, he now can have contact with his children. He can have photographs of his children, and he can talk about his children with his wife. They're still not allowed to visit him in prison. And of course, he shouldn't be in prison anyway, because he didn't really do anything that was worthy of being sent to jail. There we go. Yeah, thanks to public pressure, he can now have some contact with his children on the telephone and talk about them and have photographs of them in his cell. So that's all good. And apparently Laura Towler, his wife, was saying that she and he are now working on getting him released as soon as possible, which obviously is a good thing, and we wish them all well. Do you, Adam or Mitch, have anything to add on Sam, the story?
I mean, it was particularly egregious that just sort of like I'm not even sure what you call it, but it was just particularly mean-spirited and disgusting to bar him from. I mean, you look at like those grooming gang cases that we talked about in the past. Some of those people were, those women were forced to give these, their literal rapists access to their children, and yet. In this instance, a guy who's imprisoned over possession of stickers is not allowed to be given updates about his own children from his wife. That is sort of a level of just grotesque. I don't even know what to call it. It's particularly grim. I mean, I'm glad
if you heard the Chinese Communist Party were doing that, Mitch, if you heard the Chinese Communist Party were doing that, everyone in the West would turn around and say, "Oh yeah, typical communists." And yet it's the British government under Rishi Sunak that's doing that. And to be absolutely clear, I don't expect the Labour Party would be any better, to be honest. But there we go.
Mm.
But yeah, it's a cruel and unusual punishment that they're putting on this bloke. And the stickers that he had were merely against mass immigration, which most British people, every poll shows, are against. So
yeah, like barring one or two, you'd be hard pressed to find any majority of the public that would think that those stickers were in poor taste or inciting racial hatred, as the court claimed. Of course, the court didn't say that the content of the stickers incited racial hatred. They said that he implied to incite racial hatred, which even that's a massive sketch. Even that's a massive stretch, whether that's even really an actual point of issue or not. Those groups often incite racial hatred against us or other groups, and that is broadly defended by the state.
True. Yeah, very much so. Very much so. I totally agree on. Mitch, did you have anything you wanted to talk about in regard to Sam Melia?
I haven't really. I mean, I haven't got anything outside of talking about this election and in terms of Sam Melia stuff. I mean, but the only thing I've got positive to say about that is that my one of the candidates who I'm going to canvass for, the SDP candidate in my local area, he published Sam Melia on his own Twitter page, so I will. So I'll pay him some thanks by helping him along 0 seats and all.
Yep, fair enough. So yeah, that's pretty much the Sam Melia update. So people who have written to the prison and Home Office and signed petitions and all the rest of it, which many people did, it seems to have done some good. So he still can't have visits from his children, but apart from that, he is allowed to have limited contact with them. So that's good. Now, the vast majority of the stream this evening is obviously going to be about the general election, folks, and in particular, the return of Farage and the quest, which this channel fully supports, of 0 seats for the Conservative Party. And when I say the Conservative Party, you must imagine me putting air quotes around that, because, of course, they are in no way conservative. Mitch, I know, is doing some campaigning, so I'm going to ask him if he would like to start us off. So go for it, Mitch.
Well, I mean, it's often said that a week is a long time in politics. Well, this has to be the longest one I've known in my lifetime thus far, as far as politics goes. The longest week in my life, and from start of the week when Farage announces that he's coming back to up to this moment, it's just been a sea of white pills as far as our side is concerned. Like, we've seen Tories really solid, really on their way to 0 seats, and Reform looks set to. I mean, it's up for speculation how many seats they're going to win, because first past the post is a pretty god awful system. But leaving my side, suffice to say, we're going to knock the weakest link out of the system. I'm going to go for my local area, and certain that, for example, my constituency has been it's been rebranded. Boundaries have changed a bit, but Save Tory area, amalgamation of Gavin Williamson and Bill Cash, who are the MPs of Staffordshire and Stone, respectively. Well, yeah. No, the other way. Save Tory. Now, even in such an area, there's just widespread disenchantment at best, or just outright hatred for the Tory party. So I reckon the 28,000 vote majority there was in my local area for the Tories is going to shrink down to something like 2,000, I reckon, for the Tory candidate near me, Gavin Williams. Another constituency not far from mine, which I'm going to canvass for Reform on. The Reform guy is optimistic he'll win, because that area is it's just seeing the High Street decline, a migrant hotel, and and of course Jeremy Hunt's raising of a corporation tax. That's one thing that's often mentioned, because a lot of people use it on small businesses. Well, a lot of us people are screwed over that they can't. So there's just a lot of disenchantment and hatred of the Tories in this area, and I'll do my best to make sure 0 seats happens in this area.
Yeah, it was the Farage announcement was on my birthday. It was quite the birthday present for me. I am technically still a member of Reform, so I should go out and canvass. But oddly enough, despite this being the only election that I felt I could have any optimism for, basically in my life, I'm going on holiday next week, so I'm not going to get a chance between now and the election to do any real canvassing, which is slightly irritating. But the Reform candidate, even in my area, stood no real chance. And the Tories aren't going to win a seat here either. So, it basically is what it is. It is. I assume it's probably a different story up your way, Mitch, but like round here where I am, which is like East Kent way. I mean, I particularly live in sort of the outskirts of or just outside of Canterbury. And obviously being a student city and having a student population, it's a pretty dyed-in-the-wall leftist area. You know, even up until like 2 years ago, you'd see graffiti on the road against Brexit and crap like that. And so yeah, the political landscape down here just seems to be completely off kilter with basically the rest of the country. It's kind of bizarre.
Yeah, I'm quite optimistic about my neck of the woods. I reckon that he's just going to be. I think Gavin Williamson, like he was unfortunately he was my MP before this election was called. I think he's going to be one. I think he's going to be one of a few Tory party MPs who's probably got one of the strongest majorities of just only 2,000 by the end of all this. So there's that, and there's also, as I said, the constituents I'm canvassing in. I'm canvassing in my local two constituencies for two different parties. SDP for my local area, because the SDP candidate, as I said earlier, he endorsed, like he helped Sam Melia basically on his Twitter page, while these other constituency I'm canvassing in, well, I can't vote, but you know, I'll do my best. Reform candidate, pretty nice guy. I prodded him, and I think he's taking an ethno-nationalist pill, should we say? Like, because I prodded him a bit with the whole Rishi Sunak D-Day situation, because he's like, I think he's the same age as Farage, or same generation, and you could look at his face and you just tell like there was a sense of crushing when he just had to factor that, oh, the prime minister we have isn't really British in any way, shape, or form. Like he just so. I mean, I'm chuffed to bits that, like, you know, even the boomers are waking up on the Indian question, as well as taking that sort of race realist pill, for want of a better way of explaining it.
Yeah, someone said to me a while back.
Sorry, I mean, you carry on. Man.
It's just someone said to me a while back that they'd met with Farage, and he was basically with us on every position. I remember he even used to say some quite dicey things about the Jews. I don't really. That seems to have dried up a lot, but like he does still seem to be like he's always been more of our guy than I think some people are willing to admit. Like with this whole thing with Sunak, you know, I kind of found the D-Day stuff a bit boring. I didn't really care, you know, as far as Sunak leaving, probably because I just thought it was predictable. But Farage has been really pushing this point, like to the point of it being basically a dog whistle. You know, he's leading people up to that point and then just kind of allowing people to make their own conclusions without him having to walk into, you know, rhetorical traps and some such. It has been it's been quite interesting to see. I mean, I actually did sit down and watch most of that, the political debates from last night. Was it last night? Yeah, it was last night, wasn't it? Yeah. I didn't finish it. I could only watch so far through. I mean, that was it was pretty appalling, generally speaking. I mean, typical from you know from the sort of thing you'd expect from a sort of mainstream TV debate. There was literally this bit where they did like a round table sort of like literal masturbation session over the NHS. And there was one particular bit in it, which was when Farage actually came out and he talked about the NHS. And I kind of thought at the time, this is probably not something you should talk about. It's something you can only lose on. And yet he actually towed this really good line where he sort of like cut down the middle and sort of got to the heart of it in a way was still countering all the other parties there, but was probably going to get through to a lot of people, I imagine. And there's a bit where the SNP leader is like, you just need to be honest or something like that. He's like, you need to admit that you're not a true believer in the NHS, our national treasure. It's like it was pretty fucking shocking, like the whole golden calf worship going on. But it did at least allow for some comedic entertainment.
Well, they say that Prussia used to be an army that had a nation. I think the NHS is a health service that has a nation in Britain's case. It's like it dominates government spending and everything else. I mean, you know, Britain, if Britain didn't have an NHS, we could easily afford to put a man on the moon. It's just insane the amount of money that is wasted on the NHS, because a lot of it is wasted because it goes on admin and diversity quotas and all this bullshit. But yeah, I'm wondering what you guys think. I think that Farage could even pick up some people who would otherwise vote Labour, particularly the Brexit supporters. I think the more traditional Labour voters. Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on, man.
Yeah. The candidate I'm canvassing for, he said the same. He says he's come across a lot of former Labour voters who's saying they're voting Reform for him in July. So I reckon that's one thing. The main thing that's not really talked about, and it's not really of interest in our circles, perhaps not as much as it would be to, let's say, another our media, is how much is Galloway going to tap into the Muslim vote of the Gaza issue? Because the Labour Party have really gone heavy on trying to keep the Muslims in this uneasy coalition, even when Starmer has been purging a lot of his Corbyn types from the party because they're too pro-Palestine.
Yeah, I think there's some truth in that. And there's quite a lot of normies out there who are not particularly pro-Palestine because they've been affected by the counter-jihad arguments of people like Tommy Robertson and people like that. But I absolutely myself, I support the idea of the Conservatives getting 0 seats. I don't think we'll actually achieve that, but to get them as low as possible is the best thing that could possibly happen from the point of view of people like ourselves, because it's going to help break that two-party system, and it's the only possibility we have of breaking that two-party system. Really, they're a uni-party. In real terms, there's very little difference between Labour policies and the so-called Conservative policies. Pretty much the same party. But if we can break one wing of it, who knows what might happen in the future. I've seen people talking about Farage and Reform picking up maybe 6 MPs, but also possibly getting another 6 as defectors from the so-called Conservatives, who can see the writing on the wall. And, Farage leading a group of even just 12 MPs in Parliament, because I think Farage has got a good chance of winning his own seat. Farage leading a group of even a dozen MPs in Parliament could change things quite a lot. In particular, because the Conservatives just will not be able to carry on in the way they've been carrying on over the last 10 or 15 years. If they've got that very dangerous opposition from Farage on the right. I don't know what you guys think about that, Alan and Mitch, but that's the next thing I'd like to discuss anyway.
Mitch, you go first, I suppose.
Well, I didn't fully catch it because you keep roboting for me. I think it's an issue over my end, so I might. I don't.
Sorry. What I was trying to say, Mitch, was that if the Farage and Reform could pick up what I've been hearing anyway from people who know what they're talking about, is they could certainly pick up like 6 MPs, perhaps, including Farage himself. And the
nominations have ended now, so I don't know if that's possible. Yeah. I mean, it's like, for example, you take my constituency. There's no way Gavin Williamson is going over to Reform. Like, he's so much.
Oh no! I'm sorry, mate. I'm sorry. What I was trying to say was that they could get 6 MPs voted in, but they could also pick up to another 6 from Conservatives. But this is you may think differently, and I don't pretend to be an expert. It's just what I'm hearing people say who claim to know what they're talking about. So this is what I was asking.
Well, it's kind of like that Connor Tomlinson fellow off Lotus. He's arguing for there's some exemption to 0 seats, and it's just like, well, these MPs who still stand under the Tory banner, even though, like Miriam Case, for example, she's talking about natalism and anti-mass immigration and whatnot. Well, she still needs to be put down to 0 seats because people like her, they didn't do anything when they were in the ruling party. They didn't defect to reform when they saw the Tory party disobey their own manifesto. So I don't see what incentive there would be on Nigel's part to accept all these Tory party MPs when the whole point of him is he's trying to frame himself as, anti-establishment. It's, I mean, I think like reform could pick up some MPs up in the Blythe Valley, like Morgoth's neck of the woods. I wonder if that would be feasible, if reform would pick up some MPs in that area, because you can imagine all those red wall voters. There must be some of the most, to put it mildly, annoyed if they're not stabbed in the back. They're just going to massively flock to reform because they're not can't go back to Labour because they've left Labour because the issues that talk about the issues that affect Labour still affect them now. Like, who wants to vote for Keir Starmer? I don't know anyone who wants to vote for Keir Starmer.
There are 2 people in my office that are going to vote Labour that I know of. One of them is a woman and just generally seems to like Labour for reasons that she can't actually explain or put into words. The other one, he just says, "Oh well, the Tories have had 14 years and they fucked it up, so I'm gonna give someone else a try." That sort of stick.
Mm-hmm. Like anything will really change under Labour,
Yeah.
I mean, I think anyone who thinks that the Labour Party, they might reduce immigration marginally, maybe. I'm not sure about that myself, but they might. But that's the very best anyone can hope for them. It's not really going to make any difference. But yeah, we will talk about Homeland and what have you a bit further on in the discussion, guys. And as Mitch is saying in the chat there, they're actually behind reform at the moment because reform are the people who might get some seats and can take votes away from the Conservatives. As I say, when I say Conservatives, please imagine me putting air quotes around it because, they conserve nothing.
I'm a member of Homeland, so they obviously get my endorsement. Although I'm technically still a member of Reform. I have got a Reform card somewhere. I was going to cancel my direct debit for the next one, but now obviously they may win me over.
I think Mitch was saying in the Discord last week that the Homeland Party might be up there and might be something that we can in due course support, but we can't at the moment because they're not running MPs. So, and in order for the Homeland Party to do any good in due course, you've got to break the system we have at the moment, because if it's still a Labour Conservative system, they will make sure they get nowhere. So, that's definitely my feeling about it.
Yeah, my main position on this, because there were some people going, "Oh, well, we should not vote reform because they're not radical enough." Like, for example, we got the net zero immigration policy. We really need to pressure Nigel on that. We really need to press him to
absolutely, we do. Yep, I agree.
Yeah, we need to pressure him on that.
It needs to be complete zero, not net zero.
I don't think he'd go for that. I'd say at the moment we just go net outflow. Well, let's just say like net outflow at the very least. I don't know. I don't think the norm is know the difference between net and gross. So
no, I don't think they do either. But it's gross zero that we should be pushing for.
And of course, even if they just went to the actual Tory manifesto of 2010 to reduce it to tens of thousands, that would be an enormous reduction, way below net zero.
Oh yeah. Of course it would. But the thing is, I agree with Mitch that Farage probably wouldn't go for that at the moment, but we should be pushing for that to get him to go as far as he's willing to go. You know.
Yeah, I'd say the Nationalist position on this whole thing should be we all get behind Reform or SDP or whatever an anti-establishment party is best in our relative constituencies. Try to see if we can get proportional representation at some point at the system. If we get both Tories absolutely smashed and proportional representation by the end of this decade, then I'd say at that point we could drop Farage and pivot back to Homeland, and Homeland will have an easier time getting votes if we were to have proportional representation. Because there's so much, I'd say it's inevitable at this point because there's so much energy outside the two parties, Tory and Labour, that I feel like the system just can't deal with it. Because, I mean, you've got Novara Media, then you've got us, and you've got the Lib Dems, you've got the Greens, literally everyone outside of Tories and Labour, the two most unpopular parties at the moment. It feels like to me. Yeah, so many people are just crying out for electoral reform. So I think at some point, somebody's going to have to give on that. I just don't see after this election. I reckon after this election, especially because reform, we're probably going to get like what a dozen MPs at the most because of how bad our voting system is. But they're many more votes than Farage did in 2015.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with what you're saying, Mitch. Good evening, AI. How you going, mate?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you? Iron Duke?
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, as we've been saying since the start of the stream, this is like a bit of a white pilling week. You know, Farage is not totally our guy. He's very far from perfect. And of course, the Reform Party themselves are a very long way from perfect. But it's the first chance we've had for, well, certainly since I can remember, and I'm quite old these days, when we actually could get some sort of a change in British politics and some sort of a break with the air quotes Conservatives and Labour Party uni party. So yeah, that's my thinking.
Yeah, true. It's I mean, ultimately, the zero seats campaign that we've seen in our circles by AA and many others, it was effectively the campaign wasn't so much zero seats so that Reform couldn't take over or some other party take over. Effectively, it was to make it so that Labour have a dictatorship level majority. And it shatters the illusion of the democratic process in this country, because one big thing, and you go on any political thread or any any reply thread, it's always the usual sort of dipshit boomer, sort of left wing type who plays into the Tory fascist, and then you have like on the counter you got on the Conservative side you've got Israeli flag bulldog nationalist account saying Labour the real racists. And so for me, I'm just happy that if it's I think it's safe to say at this point Labour are going to win the general election. I don't see this. There is no chance the Conservatives are going to win anything. I mean, lucky they're going to be lucky they get anything. I think they're going to get double-digit seats. I reckon it'll be about 50 or 70.
Yeah, I really hope we can get them under 100. That would be a big win, as far as I'm concerned.
I think it would be under 100. I think Reform could pick up, as Mitch said, a handful of seats. I think Labour are going to have a pretty decent sized majority. I think it's going to be bigger than 97. And so for me, I'm the reason I'm in it's another good thing for shattering illusion. And I know some people on our side don't really like to hear this, but if say let's just say hypothetically conservatives are wiped out, they get what the conservatives in Canada got in '93, I think, where they were reduced from the ruling party to 3 seats, and effectively the party was done. You then have the Liberal, in this scenario, Labour would have overwhelming, they would have like near enough all the seats in the country, plus their left wing allies in Liberal Democrats, SNP, Plaid, what have you. That it would shatter the illusion. It would make the system unbalanced, and the system always relies on this on the democratic left-right paradigm, like the Batman. Was it like the Batman and the Joker? One needs the other, and the other can't live without the one. And so, in many ways, it would be more damn. I mean, I do think there's probably elements within the Labour Party, because back in '97, Tony Blair was actually terrified during the night of '97 because he had this feeling that this would happen for him, that because he realised the Tories were getting an absolute wipeout, he would have this absolute majority, and the system that was in place then wouldn't be able to continue because it would just nakedly show that the sort of democratic system just didn't exist. It was false, and it would morph into something else. So that's where I'm at really on this. I mean personally in my seat, I guess I'd vote Reform because there's no one else.
Well, we've got nothing to lose at this stage. I mean, when I say we, I mean all of us on the DR. As far as I'm concerned, we have nothing to lose. So, yeah, vote Farage, vote Reform. I think that's the way to go at the moment. We were saying before you joined us that, Farage may pick up some traditional white working class Labour voters, particularly if they were Brexit supporters. I think that's quite likely to happen, which is something, of course, the Conservatives will not do. And we had the spectacle this week of our Indian banker Prime Minister, who, of course, nobody ever voted for him to be Prime Minister. Like even the so-called Conservative Party members rejected him at least twice. We had the spectacle of him insulting the memory of the British D-Day veterans. But then, as many people said on Twitter, I mean, really, we shouldn't blame him. He's not British. He's got no connection to this, to the dead British guys who died in a British battle 80 years ago. He's an Indian. So,
I do wonder what his reaction would be towards Burma weapons.
Well, even there, like the most of the big victories over there were actually won by the British troops and the Gurkha troops. But anyway,
well, that's my. I mean, the trouble is, I think, and I don't know if you guys, in my sort of subconscious thinking, when this story all came out, I mean, like what Dan from Brokenomics on Lotus Eaters pointed out, why cross? Because he's not English, he's an Indian, and I do wonder, that it shows throughout his entire time as Prime Minister. I mean, in the UK, he's like a one nation Tory lefty shithead, and in India, he's a Hindu nationalist, and we see this for the Muslims as well, like Ash Sarkar and people like that. Here at the UK, they're left wing, dipshits, and then at home, they are, quite strict observance of customs and cultures in that setting.
Oh yeah.
And so, I reckon probably deep down there's, like within many Hindu nationalists, there is a deep hatred of Britain. And remember that generation, no matter how much bullshit that propaganda comes out even during the D-Day thing. I mean, they weren't fighting for, democracy or any of this other fabricated bollocks. The reason we know is I've got at home the propaganda posters at the time. I purchased some of them in various things.
Very well said. Very well said. Look, I because I'm an old bastard. I spoke to many British World War II veterans when I was a teenager and also as a young man, and they were almost all nationalist and patriotic, and they were fighting for Britain. They were even fighting for the empire back then, believe it or not. They were not fighting for diversity, democracy, liberalism, or any bullshit like that. In fact, the vast majority of those World War II British fighting dudes, and the same applies to Canadians and Australians and even Americans back then, the vast majority of those dudes would now be regarded as far right.
Yeah, I mean, even the Americans were fighting for the glory of the American nation, which was at that time a what were they called? Like white Anglo-Saxon Protestant nation. And I think there was polling done for American troops at the time, and it was like something ridiculous. It was like 94% were in favor of racial segregation in the army, and held very extreme hostility.
The American military in World War II was entirely racially segregated. So
yeah, I mean, that a lot of these, and remember, a lot of the troops in the American army were from the South. They would have been voting for, they would have been brought up in, the sort of what they call the Dixiecrats. They would have been voting for people who were not liberal in our modern conception of it, and were not for equality. And they were, exclusive in thinking. They were totally the opposite. People, and as someone said in chat, Bowden, I've posters here. All the propaganda posters on the British side was aimed at fighting, defend the history, the honour, and the glory of Britain and her empire. I mean, it goes back to the empire. They weren't fighting for, democracy in Europe or even the liberation of France stuff. That was just all post hoc rationalization, largely for war films. Unfortunately, a lot of war films after the Second World War. But yeah, none of it is true. I mean, that you could actually find in some war films in the 50s, 60s, and even possibly in the 70s that would harken back to, promotion of the empire and the glory of the empire. But I mean, even today, I mean, one thing that is you see it often, and somebody in a comment sort of did a reply, who sort of pointed this out, where you say, like, when they refer to Germany, it's like, fascist Germany or Nazi Germany. And one thing I find frustrating when you listen to that is, okay, yeah, true, but at the same time, they were the government of Germany. They weren't like some separate entity of Germany. That was the government of Germany.
Look, I think AI that you're entirely correct, and I do 99% agree with you. I think Apostolic Majesty had a good take on Twitter when he said that, Rishi Sunak, the Indian banker, Prime Minister of Britain, couldn't be bothered to honour the British dead from D-Day, but he wants to bring back conscription. It's just insane. It really is just insane. Guys, I'd just like to get Adam and Mitch back into the conversation.
Well, just to quickly bounce off the back of that as well. This is the same government that also made it so that dodging conscription was a legitimate form of claiming asylum here in Britain. and now they want to bring in conscription for British citizens here.
Insanity. Mitch, did you have anything you wanted to say about that, mate?
Not much. I mean, I wonder how many boomers have got that I've started to think to themselves, perhaps Rishi Sunak isn't that British after all. Because of course the problem is a lot of the boomers, they are civ-nuts. I'm not saying all of them, Borre Duke. I'm not saying all of them before. But the thing is, yeah, I've come across boomers who are civ-nuts, and I wonder how many of them are just having that little inkling in their brain going.
I think many, Mitch. I think many, and I think that Sunak's mistake over the D-Day stuff, and it was a political mistake, will actually wake some of these people up for the wrong reasons in some cases. But still, I don't care as long as it wakes them up. You know, 0 6.
Yeah, and it's I mean. You're looking at this situation where I think apparently Rishi Sunak is so apparently the Tory party has run out of money, which that's new. And secondly,
I was just going to bring this up, Mitch. That also Sunak has cancelled all his media appointments for today, and we were talking about this just before we went live. So carry on, Mitch, because you had a interesting point of view on this. So it's Sunak's cancelled all his media interviews for today, and I do suspect some people think he's going to resign. Which, you know, if he resigns in the middle of the election campaign, that's just going to finish the Conservatives, I think.
Yeah, I mean, how many? Well, I mean, the past. I mean, the only prime minister we've had who became leader because of winning became prime minister due to winning a general election was David Cameron. All the ones who came after him became leader because of internal squabbles. And in the case of Rishi Sunak, he was just parachuted in after Boris, for whatever reason, dropped his leadership bid at that point. So you can definitely tell that there was internal. There were people embedded within the Tory party who wanted the brain man as prime minister, and believe well, they got it. But I think AA is right when he says, I think the Tories, I think Rishi Sunak has probably ruined the idea of a non-white prime minister for a long time.
I do hope so.
I mean, a largely portion of it was most of the Tory party now is what the faction they call the One Nation, which is effectively the Cameronite faction, neo-Blairism, and they're the most incompetent, the most incompetent ones and the most treacherous and weaselly ones. And to be honest, like out of the list of MPs, most MPs belong to the One Nation or affiliated in some way. And Sunak was a part of that, and there was in the Brexit stuff with Gove and Boris, there was a schism within the One Nation because some of them wanted global Britain and for gay and lame reasons, and others were to stay in the EU for similar reasons. And I mean, for me, one of my concerns with reform is that you make sure that those like characters can't weasel their way into reform and do the same.
Oh, look, AI, there's no doubt there are some very bad people in reform. I mean, Tice being one of them. I mean, had Farage not replaced Tice immediately when he came back, then I'm not sure I would be endorsing him. I endorse reform purely on the basis that Farage has taken it over. And you can say, and look, Farage has his faults. There are various areas where I don't agree with Farage at all. But he did campaign for years and eventually deliver Brexit. I mean, albeit that the Westminster political establishment made it as weak as they possibly could and undermined it as much as they could. But he did win the Brexit vote. And in my life, if I'm looking at the two moments that were the best days in my life, that were not strictly personal, you understand. I mean, I've had other days when I got married and when my son was born and what have you, that were great days in my life. But if I'm looking at days that were great to be an Englishman and a Briton, I would say when the Royal Navy flagship came home victorious from the South Atlantic in 1982, when I was at Portsmouth and I watched it, and the whole shore, all of the shore of Portsmouth was just a sea of Union flags and white ensigns and English flags and, you know, a few Welsh flags and Scottish flags. It was just a totally British occasion, and like everyone was just proud to be British that day. That was a great day. The other day that I remember that was brilliant was when we won the Brexit vote. So I'm willing to give Farage a chance, and in particular because he's the only guy who possibly could break this uni-party nonsense that we have in Britain at the moment. What do you guys think of that?
Well, I mean, like ultimately, the thing is that if it was just down to people not voting Tory, the Tories can survive one bad election. You know, even if they're reduced to 100 seats, they can probably survive it. It's only one election; they can weather it. They can start to make a comeback. But because there's actually an opposition there now, within the right to them, which is reform, it isn't just damage from one election. They could be damaged for 2 or 3 elections in a row
and lose more and more seats. Yeah.
In the best case scenario for them, and that will kill them. The moment they come second in votes to a party like Reform is the moment the Tories are actually dead. And you just couldn't hope for that sort of outcome on just like a 0 seat strategy alone. It needed an actual party there that could fill that void, even if it's just to punish them in vote share enough to kill them off over the next 2 elections, and then Reform goes, you know, it just becomes the new Tory party to be destroyed next. It's still and there's an element to which you're kicking the can down the road, but it's going to be more successful in destroying the Tories than just people not showing up for the polls one time.
One way I look at it, Adam, and I don't know if you'll agree with this, is I think the Farage thing is a little bit like a British version of Trump. Trump is by no means perfect. He's really a 1990s Democrat, but it does give people on the right in America somebody they can vote for, you know, which in Britain, until Farage returned, we just didn't have, you know, at all.
Yeah.
I mean,
sorry. So carry on, AI.
I was going to say, I mean, I've heard, like in my seat, which is relatively safe Conservative seat, you know, there's not much in the way of opposition. I mean, even here, there has been horrendous backlash. A lot of the party membership are refusing to do leafleting. I've seen countless signs of like for Liberal you know, like the placards they have like for Liberal Democrats, Labour. I've seen a few Reform, but I'm not seeing Conservative ones. And I think Atterman could be right. I mean, on a separate level, if the Tories then get wiped out in council elections, district council elections, you know, top down, just removal. The only problem that you would have, I guess, maybe with the House of Lords, because you have a second chamber which is dominated by Tory peers who are there until effectively they die.
But I mean, that has limited powers. You know, the House of Lords, and some of us don't even agree with the way the House of Lords has been gradually changed since, in fact, the time that the wonderful, and I use that term with air quotes around it, Winston Churchill crossed the floor from the Conservatives to the Liberals because he didn't support imperial tariff reform, which was in like 1908, I believe, roughly. Certainly well before the First World War. But since then, the House of Lords has been like basically had its balls cut off for years. So, you know, it can delay stuff, but it can't stop things. And also, I'm not sure if it's really dominated by Tory peers or if it's dominated by Labour Life peers. I think it's more Labour Life peers that Blair made. But anyway, whatever.
Well, yeah, you got the likes of like Lord Adonis and all those sorts of. I was about to drop the F-bomb. You know, those sorts of disgusting, like subhuman creatures.
True.
So
I was going to drop the K-bomb.
I'm very often inclined to drop the C bomb, but you can't on YouTube, you know.
I mean, people in chat have been talking also about Tommy. One of the story that happened briefly just before this, which sort of overshadowed, was there was I think last weekend there was that. Or I think we may have talked about it, but there was that whole gathering with Tom Robinson, and you know. I know because Mitch and Ataman, you're both sort of looking at the Homeland Party, and I've been looking at it, and I think they've somewhat endorsed reform this election.
Yep.
On a sort of level like this, and I think one thing I would say, and I was thinking about this in Italy. The way that this worked is it went from like the centre-right Conservative Party under Berlusconi, and then it went to Lega Nord, which was like the more populist right, and then it's gone to Brothers of Italy with the more, I guess, classical far right, and now it's sort of fracturing from the Brothers of Italy to even more like the fascist right. And so there is like a path that you can go through. And the same thing happened in Hungary. There's even a right-wing party beyond Viktor Orban, which is quite more nationalistic. And they take inspiration from Evola and his works, as I found out in a few books I've got. So there is like a path that people could go through from like the Civnats. There is a path you can sort of because if the right gets more in away from liberalism, it will, because ultimately the Civnat sort of stuff like Tommy Robinson and people like that and Maya Toosey and all the other sort of clowns in that sort of show will also become as irrelevant as the Tories. So I'm actually quite optimistic in some ways with that future.
Look, I just noticed someone in the chat pointing out that Tommy Robinson helped bring some attention to Sam Melia's plight, the British political prisoner Sam Melia, who we talked about at the start of the stream. If anyone's interested in his case, go back to the start of the stream and we talk about him and what's happening at the moment. But yeah, I mean, if Tommy Robinson does good stuff like that, I'll support him in that. You know, I don't like the fact that, as far as I'm concerned, he's a bit of a Zionist shill. But if when he says good things, I'll say, yeah, cool, that's good.
Yeah, and he's a cokehead, and he misdirects a lot of.
Yeah,
energy.
no, Adam, absolutely, totally agree with you, mate. I've no argument at all. But I mean, it's like most of the people who went to that rally a couple of weeks ago. Are most of them good, patriotic Brits? Yeah, probably they are, actually. You know, I mean, yes, he does misdirect people, but
I mean, looking at the flags, most of them were good, patriotic Iranian monarchists.
Yeah. Look, mate. Yeah, look. I said at the time, and I stick to it, that at that thing that he organised, that also, like, Carl went to, Sargon of Akkad, he went there as well. And I said at the time, and I stick to it, the only flags at that event should have been Union flags, crosses of St. George, crosses of St. Andrew, the Welsh flag, and the Northern Irish flag. They're the only flags that should have been there, and like the Isle of Man or stuff like that. Nothing else.
Yeah, that's right. There is no black in the Union Jack.
Exactly. That's the way there was no place there for Israeli flags or even Iranian flags. I'm sorry, there wasn't.
Yeah. I'm going to have to head off now, Iron Duke, as well.
Thank you for joining us, You're always very welcome on the stream.
Yeah,
I
thought it was good. I wanted just to join about the election stuff because that was a significant update. A very significant update.
Yep. Go well, mate. Go well. And you, as I say, you're always welcome on the stream.
I'll be back. I'll be seeing you all next week on next Splendid Isolations on Saturday.
Good stuff,
I'll see you all then.
Good stuff. Look, as I say, but my thing is, when Tommy Robinson does come out with something that is reasonable, like supporting Sam Melia, for example, and mentioning his cruel and unusual punishment at the hands of the British government, then yeah, I'm going to say you're right about that, Tommy.
Mm.
And I still think that most of the people who supported that march in London were probably good people. A lot of them are pretty much normies, really.
Yeah.
I think we actually have to convert these people. The only way we're going to win this in the end is by converting these normie people. We have to. I mean, all right, I agree to some extent with AA's thing that this is all top down, and you've got to have leadership and all the rest of it. Yeah, all totally true. But you do actually, at the end of the day, have to try and convert Joe Blogg's average. You do.
So in the mind of it all being top down, do you not give any credence to the idea that actually no one's steering the ship, that we're so invested in, that the establishment is so invested in the founding myth that people just get to pretend to stand next to the wheel occasionally and have their photo taken with it, but no one's actually steering the ship at all? It's just almost on autopilot at this point.
Look, if you look at that senile moron Biden in America, you've got to give that some credence, haven't you? Really, because I don't know who's running the USA these days, but it sure ain't Joe Biden. So, did you see him at the D-Day celebrations when he suddenly got distracted? They were doing the last post, and he just started looking around, and Macron and the old lady he's married to and all the rest of it were all turning around to try and cover for him, as if there was some reason for him to do so, other than him being totally senile and not even knowing where he is. So it's like,
yeah, it was pretty bad.
But Sunak wasn't even there, of course. But why should he be? He's an Indian. He's got nothing to do with British history and British military history. Really nothing whatsoever. So yeah, Mitch, you haven't said anything for a while, mate. What's your view on all this stuff we've been talking about?
I mean, I don't really have much to say about Biden. He shot himself at a D-Day event, and his wife had to cover her mouth. Apparently, I remember seeing a video where his wife, whatever her name is, had to cover her mouth. So I guess it was a real stinker. Yeah. I mean,
the so-called leader of the so-called free world. What a joke! I mean, what a bad joke, basically.
Yeah, just think as well, they'd rather, they were so desperate to get rid of Trump, a guy who they could have just allowed to sit in the White House achieving nothing for another 4 years. They were so desperate to just not have him around in any capacity that they would choose this guy instead.
And he's running again. I mean, he's supposedly running again to be president.
Well, they don't have anyone else, do they? Like, that party is actually devoid of talent.
That's true.
I mean, it's kind of weird because it's like sometimes people on the right used to, they don't so much now, but people on the right used to talk about like the inner and outer party. In America, this actually like does work. Like, the Democrats are the inner party and the Republicans are the outer party. But to bring it back to here, that actually doesn't exist. Like, here it's sort of inverted. The Tories are sort of like the inner party with an added level of incompetence, pretended to be the outer party. It's so bizarre. But in America particularly, they've just got, and it's kind of the same for the Republicans. They just don't have anyone of talent in their political system at all. There's no one even slightly charismatic or likable.
Yeah, no, I agree. Just to let people in the chat know, because people are saying we're all an AA fan club here, and we agree with AA and what have you. Not true at all, actually. I like some of AA's takes. I do. You can find me pretty regularly in the chat on AA streams, but do I always agree with them? By no means, and when I don't, I say so. And so, no, we are not all an AA fan club at all. My support for 0 seats, for example, is based on we need a real right-wing party in Britain, a real right-wing pro-British, which means basically Anglo-Celtic party in Britain. That's why I support 0 seats. It isn't big, and I detest the Labour Party. I've never voted for the Labour Party. I wouldn't vote for the Labour Party if my life depended on it, frankly. So,
I mean, I've always been a bit hot and cold on the guy. I find that he ebbs and flows. He got pretty cringe quite recently, and he seems to have quite very recently sort of pulled it back. But he sort of ebbs and flows as it goes.
That's totally my view, Outman. When he says stuff that I agree with, I'll say, yeah, it's great. When he says stuff I don't agree with, which he quite often does, I'll tell him I don't agree with it. Likewise,
I do like
Mambo
Morgoth,
Jambo
though.
in the chat. I do. I like Morgoth a lot, but Morgoth is not a. But the idea that Morgoth is a AA supporter is not true at all. I mean, Morgoth's got his own independent view, which I like to believe I have, and you have, Armin, and Mitch has. We have our own independent views on this. But yeah, I do like Morgoth. I think most of Morgoth's takes are very good. I don't always agree with him, but for the majority, yes, I do. He's a great guy, and I'm always happy to have him on my stream. But is Morgoth a total PA supporter? I don't think so. Morgoth often diverges from some of the things PAs say. So again, no. I mean, are we all broadly in the same sphere? That's true, we are. Do we all broadly want a better future for the real Anglo-Celtic people of Britain? Yes, we do. But yeah, none of us are totally aligned. But that's we're English and British people, and we're able to have disagreements on things without totally falling out. And one of the things I hate about the right is that we used to spend, and I hope this is going to slowly stop, we used to spend more time slagging each other off than we did slagging off our real enemies. So,
Royal Biscuits, though, said, to bring it back to AA, Weimar stream was the best he's done. I do think that sort of era of AA was where he peaked, and he's kind of been, with a few exceptions, he's kind of been on a general downhill trend since then. That probably sounds a bit harsh, but
I think the last week or so he's realised that he was going too pro-Labour and too pro-Blair, and he's pulled it back a bit. I don't know if
but
you
it's
agree
not
with
even
that,
just
but that's
that,
what
it's
I
just
think.
the general arc of content. Like back then he had like the deepest law on the Muppets and the deepest law on Thomas the Tank Engine, which were generally like it was generally banging right-wing content. And
fair enough.
he sort of picked it up again when he had this sort of little revival where he was going through these like old books. I remember at the event he wasn't very well last year, but we were sort of sitting there like a bunch of disciples listening to him, and he was talking about like how the PDF has sort of like been a real sort of death blow for the regime, or will be, because it's allowed a lot of the sort of the fact finding that happened in the post-war era within the British intelligentsia to be sort of safeguarded. And of course he went through this period where he was covering a lot of those writings, like what's his name, the guy who wrote the Imperial Obituary and other such books in that sphere. But generally speaking, I think he's still been on a slight downward trend.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Look, I think he's definitely losing that bet with Aura McIntyre about them putting the woke away, because this is just not happening as far as I can see.
Yeah.
So I think he's losing that bet.
Yeah, and he tried to address that in the Tomlinson talk, where he was basically saying, "Oh, they don't care about the woke stuff anymore." It's like, well, no, people do care about the woke stuff, but it's dressing it up in this cutesy thing, like, oh, the wokery of trans people and this and thingies and that. It's like, no, like the issue behind woke really is the sort of ideological mind virus that exists behind it, whereby our institutions are broadly captured and sort of essentially shit on their own people from a very high height. And that's people don't want a bunch of politicians to sit around and go, oh, what about when Britain had some balls? They want politicians that are actually going to do anything about these actual systemic issues that surround this broader ideology. And I mean, I've always hated the word woke anyway, because you're allowing your enemies to hide behind their own cutesy little labels.
True.
You should call these people what they are, which is dysgenic freaks.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, mate. But yeah, I don't look. But anyone who thinks that this is a AA fanboy channel would come very unstuck. I mean, go and look in my Discord if you get the chance to join my Discord, because it's an invite-only Discord. But yeah, we're not an AA fanboy channel at all. And as I say, I like Morgoth. Yeah, I mostly agree with his takes, because Morgoth is a sensible English and British dude who is a nationalist, and a real nationalist, in my opinion. But
yeah,
I totally agree with him? Of course not. We're different humans, we're different men.
Yeah. That said, something Jim does point out, and this is a really good point, is that we're in Pride Month now, or at least it's supposed to be American Pride Month, I believe, isn't it? And it's much less noticeable than previous years. I mean, it was definitely much more noticeable. Like American Pride Month basically ended up just being International Pride Month last year, and it definitely doesn't feel that way this year.
I would say that, like, I put a video up in the Discord, Adam, and yesterday or the day before, which is Pride at the Pentagon. So and it was this thing in the U.S. Air Force, and I say thing purely because I don't know what sex they were, couldn't tell, or what sex they started out as, whatever. And they must terrify the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah.
Or maybe they don't, but they certainly terrify me.
I mean, the only time I've even heard about it at all, outside of like us talking about it, is it was mentioned in the office. Someone mentioned, oh, it says here about it being Pride Month. And before that, I had posted in the work WhatsApp group, which is supposed to be for like work issues, but I just turned it into a glorified racist meme page. And I posted in there. It said like nobody on the 1st of June, and then it says corporate HR departments, and it's got Tony Soprano just shouting, "Why don't you suck cock?" and as soon as someone mentioned that in the office, other people started joking about that meme, and it kind of got a little bit of a revival again. So I mean, people generally do just see this. Even people that are kind of more who would consider themselves more liberal kind of see this whole thing as a bit of a laughingstock now, which does horrific things for actual regime apparatchik types who desperately want this stuff to be taken seriously, because that's how they infer sort of social status from it.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, you can see on Twitter there are people doing burnouts on top of their rainbow pedestrian crossings and stuff like this. I mean, and good luck to people who do burnouts on those things, because that's what they deserve, frankly. Oh dear. But, yeah. What's your opinion on this stuff, Mitch? You haven't said anything for a bit, mate.
In regards to the AA issue, well, he's brown. I think that's all one needs to know.
Well, he's half brown. He's half brown, to be fair, but yeah, okay.
I mean, if I didn't know anything about him and I were to come across him in the street, I would think he was Pakistani. So, sorry, he's pretty brown to me.
Fair enough.
He isn't brown
Oh,
enough to be Pakistani, but he is definitely, you could say, non-white.
Yeah, I'll definitely say over. I mean, of the pride. So there was a pro-reform. There's this local market on Friday, which I went to town. There was one store where it was just selling like birthday cards or whatever, just normal, like normie boomer types, and they had like a couple of Reform UK flags to showcase their support. Then there was a store right next to them, run by people of the complete opposite, who had a pride flag, and they only had the pride flag because they wanted to stick it to the Reform boomers. I think that's the only major time I've really come across a pride flag in my local town in ages. So it's just like contrarianism from the shitlib morons that I have to deal with. But aside from that, I suppose the only other time I came across a pride flag was some random house in Stafford on my way to the hospital. And that was over a year ago. I just don't see. I mean, I just don't see on a regular occurrence pride flags. Perhaps it's because I actively. Perhaps it's my friendship circles or whatever that allow me to insulate from that crap. But I just don't really see. In fact, the most obnoxious pride thing I've seen is Just Eat being advertised at me on my Instagram, and I had to block them because, of course, I had a pride flag. Never mind the fact that they're one of the worst offenders for illegal immigrants, as Steve Laws will attest.
Yeah, there was an excellent stream last week by a Scots guy. Can't remember his name now. I'm sure one of you two guys will know who it is. And he had Horace, who's excellent, by the way, and I've done quite a few streams with, and also Steve Laws, who's excellent, and I follow on Twitter.
You're talking about No Chance.
No Chance, yeah. He's a Scots guy. I think he might be Glaswegian, I'm not sure, but he's certainly Scottish. And yeah, excellent stream. And, they were giving conditional support, shall we say, to Farage and Reform for the same reason that we're kind of endorsing it, because it could break the system that we're in, and we've got to break that system, I would also just say to who is it in the chat here? Either Jamaica, I think is how you would say that name. As I said earlier, as far as I'm concerned, the right spends far too much time arguing amongst themselves, and I really want to get away from that. I really do. You know,
there was some people
my real enemies.
with.
I just
there
want
was
to
some
attack
people.
my real enemies, Mitch. You know, like the people.
Well,
who
there
hate
are some
me.
people who are enemies anyway.
Yeah.
Like, there's kind of people who just tell us just not bother doing anything this-election. Like, you know, I saw one guy who was recommending me.
Total black pill people. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
That was kind of morons. Like, I saw one of them recommended Colin Liddell of all people. So, luckily, that's a small.
Yeah,
listen.
I've done 3 or 4 streams with Colin Liddell until I realised that he was really like not on my side at all, which is why I don't do them anymore. But you know, there we go. Sometimes you get fooled. You do. Sometimes you get fooled by people.
I suppose
I do anyway. So
yeah, I suppose like I don't know if you saw that Northern Variant fellow on Twitter who. Like he's been just coming out with posts like, if reform are actually worse than Tories because they're populist and they don't understand power, and we're not sure if reform, let's say Farage was the official opposition, then let's say 5 years' time he wins an election against Labour, for argument's sake, do we think that Farage has what it takes to take on all the Blairite, Quangos, NGOs, pretty much the entirety of Whitehall, basically, who actually control power, unlike Westminster, as Liz Truss found it the hard way, which
I think Farage is more intelligent than Truss, but that's not, you know, particularly high bar, but you know.
Because it's like, I don't know, you have that reform, apparently they purged 2 candidates this weekend. I saw I've only seen one of them, and I just come across like, so there was this like boomer who was like, he was referring to the sub-Saharans regarding as a type of primate, shall we say? I can't say it out loud because otherwise we'll get taken down. But let's just say he really did not have any PC way of talking about the black crime rates in London and in America. Channel 4 went up to his house, I think it was like a small bungalow or something, just went, what do you like? Do you don't understand how this is offensive? And like this guy, it basically has like a very Hobbit way of viewing the world. He's just like very. I just think because he lives in a homogenous white community, and I don't think he's really come across many ethnic minorities, or I don't think he's ever come into contact with shit libs on a regular basis. So he just has this inborn naivety that allows him to just be outmaneuvered by this otherwise dim blonde woman who works at Channel 4.
Yeah, fair enough. Could I just point out, guys, that we had 65 viewers a couple of minutes ago, which is one of the highest viewerships we've had, certainly when we haven't had a special guest on. So, cool. Glad to see the channel growing. Carry on, Adam, I'm sorry.
Mitch. I mean, I haven't really got anything to add to that, but you do always get like there's even in mainstream parties, there's always like 2 types of politician. There's one that's in the inner circle and understands how it functions and possibly even how it can be destroyed, but they've had to be sort of bought into it by that point, so they're not really a threat to it. And then you've got like the likes of Liz Truss who sit outside of the inner circle, who share a lot of its positions, but just can't just can't actually understand how exactly it really operates behind the curtain. I mean, it's probably going to be kind of the thing that in our moment of victory, when we think we're there, we're just not competent or experienced enough to do what's necessary, and the whole thing's going to have to essentially get reset. I suppose really, if you look at this from a sort of historical setting, this keeps happening until eventually you win under the guise of a group that's so full of revolutionary fervor that they literally just kill everyone in their way. And not that I'm advocating for this, obviously, on someone else's YouTube channel, but that kind of always seems to be how these things play out. So yeah, the likelihood is that even if you get even if you get your semi-based guy into power, they just don't understand, and they can't understand what it is that they're up against. So yeah,
I do believe you're right, Alderman. I think there's much truth in what you say. I think, for what it's worth, that I think Farage he's a lot brighter than Truss, that's for sure. He might be brighter than Trump, perhaps. I'm not sure. He could be.
oh no, I absolutely think he would be. Yeah.
Yeah. So could he overcome this? Yeah, possibly. Am I relying on him overcoming this? No, not at all. I just want him to.
But it's one thing to be. I will point out just quickly. It's one thing to be smart enough to outmaneuver these people. It's another thing to know actually what it is you're trying to outmaneuver. I mean, I think generally in like the right, we've actually got a pretty half decent understanding, more so than previous generations of nationalist movements have, in terms of. I mean, you can see this on Twitter all the time, like so many banging threads on, dissecting certain parts of the government and their relationships to other parts. But even then, I think that our understanding still pales in comparison to what the actual picture looks like.
Oh yeah, no, certainly. I totally agree. I mean, look, the first thing you got to understand is that almost the entire British civil service is your enemy. And the British civil service is an enormous thing because it's not just the official civil servants. It's also most of the people who work for councils, most of the people who work for the NHS, all of that. All of those people who run that stuff are your enemies. And then, of course, there's there's the entirety of the mainstream media, all your enemies. So it's a gigantic colossus that you have to take on if you're going to make any difference. It's absolutely 100%. And the same thing is true in America, which is why Trump's first presidency achieved as little as it did. I mean, because I'm sure he didn't realize that before he got in. And then, of course, Trump sacked his best advisors and kept his worst ones. So, I mean, whatever. But there we go.
You started a comment that said nationalism will get nowhere without leftist movements on board. All those racist northerners will never vote right. Did you want to?
No. I actually didn't star it. I put him in timeout as well.
Oh, I do think it's worth discussing though.
By all means, do, mate. The thing I objected to was the racist northerners bit, because I think everyone is racist. I certainly am. And if people call me racist, I just laugh at them because I am. Yeah. But you will find that all humans are racist, and it doesn't matter what race they are or even what skin color they have. They're all racist to some degree. We all are. And being called racist is not something that should make you curl up in a little ball and go, "Oh my God, no, I'm not." That was my objection to that comment, Adam. So yeah,
that and it's also the postmodern age, and under their own philosophy, we're all racist now, basically. It's been,
exactly.
it has been transmogrified in such a way that if you're a white woman that worries about her safety in a bad neighborhood, that is a form of racism. But even though that dangerous even though that dangerous neighborhood, of course, when depicted on TV, is full of white skinheads. But if you talk about the dangerous neighborhood without that context, you're actually racist. Funny how that works. But yeah, like I suppose it depends on what you mean by what anyone means by a leftist movement. Like generally, I always think about that Dominic Cummings quote where he says that like that every party wants to pretend that there's this moderate, like Mondeo man voter, but actually the average British voter is socially right wing and economically left wing. And
to some degree, yeah.
and I'm sort of economically and socially right wing, but at the same time, I also sit there and think, like, who gives a fuck about economics? Like, I will facilitate the client group that I wish to get power from by however means they want to see it. If they want a welfare system and universal healthcare and nationalized ownership of commodities and utilities, which actually is something I'm for anyway. The latter part anyway. Then yeah, great. That's what we'll do. That's
don't disagree with you,
100%
man.
fine with me.
I don't disagree with you. I'm a right wing guy in like nearly all respects, to be honest. And I think overall that benefits humans. But you know what? If someone wants a higher tax thing, but they're totally anti-immigration, they'll get my vote. Simple as.
I mean, the thing
Really?
is, as well, is that there's another end of this argument, which I suppose is a slightly more complex end, where you start getting into what's the leftist version of the cathedral? Is it called like the Spectre? And you start getting into that end of things. I mean, there's something to be said there as well about bringing on like leftist revolutionaries, but I don't know. They kind of like the boomers. They kind of default to type, but that might just be the demographics they belong to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm pretty much broadly in agreement with you on that one, mate. Membo Jambo, I didn't ban you. I just timed you out.
I like the spirit though. I'm
That's
right.
why you're back.
Why
That's
you're
why you're
going?
back. That's why you're back, mate. It's because I didn't ban you. I just timed you out. But yeah, no, I don't disagree with you, Ralph. And I really the issue in this election should be mass immigration. And I've seen people try like so-called in air quotes conservative people try and say no, it should be about taxation. Don't give a shit about taxation compared to immigration, really. Because you're talking about pennies on the pound, you know.
I mean, the thing
taxation
is
high, yeah.
Well, I mean, the thing about taxation is we'd have less taxation if we didn't have so many unproductive migrants, literally pouring in on a bloody boatload. It's like, for example, I saw a study, like I think it was about Bovril fella on Twitter, who pretty much said fiscally it would be cheaper to borrow. So, like, if you were to borrow enough money to pay each Pakistani Muslim in this country £100,000 per head and tell them to go back home, fiscally it would be cheaper to do that than to pay for all their social welfare needs in the space of a single year. That's how much of a net drag there are on our budget, and
I agree.
I mean, it's like, for example, you got I don't know. I mean, I've heard like Labour they might be upping up a capital gains tax, which so I'm thinking, okay, so I know a lot of guys near me in my local area who are thinking about investing into crypto, and they're looking at that and go, crap, like, because they want to get into invest into crypto as a means of thinking outside the box in order to get enough money to afford a house, and their Labour's just gonna dip their hand into that purse. So it's not enough that they cut your hamstrings underneath you through mass immigration. Like, well, I say like Labour, but also establishment at large. It's not enough that they cut your hamstrings underneath you by mass immigration, inflation, interest rates, everything else that screws you over. But they also want to deprive you of otherwise any form of taking initiative, whether it's owning a small business where you get 25% corporation tax these days under Jeremy Hunt, or capital gains tax upon any investment you make to try and better your lot in society in what is otherwise just a glorified Ponzi scheme. So,
the VAT is also worth looking at, Mitch, because VAT, if you're not wealthy, VAT affects people more than your income tax does, because you're taxed basically on everything you spend. And if you don't have any spare money, and obviously there are quite a lot of British white working class people who don't have a lot of money, particularly in areas where, like where you live, for example, where the industry has basically been destroyed. Everything you spend you're being taxed on it. So that's the issue that I would look at in terms of tax.
My
if you want people to have more kids and this sort of stuff,
my personal financial advisor is DMing me right now and telling me that to remind you that crypto is also eligible for capital gains tax.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree.
And that said, though, just briefly, I was chatting with Royal Biscuits, who's actually in chat late last night, and we were talking about Japan, and we were actually just randomly looking up the taxation policy in Japan, because we were like, well, they have tons of good utility and this, that, and the other, and their economy isn't particularly amazing. Is their taxation level high? And actually, like, their taxation level is significantly lower than ours. Their VAT level is literally half of ours. So, you know, that it's shocking what a homogenous society buys you in terms of
they
leeway.
also sorry, Adam, they also have a pretty good health system in Japan.
Yes.
Which doesn't cost them even half as much money as the NHS costs Britain.
Yeah.
And as you know, I'm quite fond of comparing Japan to Britain because, you know, we're both island nations that used to have big, powerful navies and all this kind of thing. So we have certain parallels. But yeah, I think the Japanese system is overall much better, to be honest. But, yeah. We're also being told that Japan is cheap to take a holiday in at the moment, apparently. So there you go. But I'm quite fond of the Japanese. I think they're pretty good people, and I'm glad that Japan is over 98% Japanese still. Good luck to them. I wish Britain still was.
I don't know if you saw that one video I saw circulating on Twitter a few days back, where it's this Japanese. I'm guessing it's a Japanese minister or businessman or something like that. He was just saying, "Oh, message to all the Indian youth: come over to Japan. We need young entrepreneurial men." And I'm just sat there thinking, you really don't know what's coming your way.
Yeah,
yeah. He obviously hasn't met the average Indian.
Yeah, and the thing is, the Japanese won't enjoy them when they get there, and the Japanese, unlike the British, will actually make it pretty clear to these Indians that they're not very welcome.
I hope so.
Yeah. Did you see that Chinese candidate for reform, Jake? Did you see that Chinese candidate for reform?
I did.
Yeah, that is my personal experience with Chinese people. They really are. They really do not like brown people. So, if Japanese or anything like that.
If you want to find really racist people in the world, you've got to go to that part of Asia, China, Japan, but also it's true of the Thais. It's true of all those guys in that area are the most racist people you will ever find. They don't even like each other, let alone like totally different people.
Yeah, I gotta find it. I mean, I don't know. I got a bit of controversy on Twitter for saying I would probably not bother deporting that one Chinese woman in Birmingham just because I don't know. I mean, that's it. I mean, there is a problem with like Chinese or East Asian women wanting to always mix with the blokes from our group, and unfortunately, it's a problem because a lot of our women are bloody awful, to say the least. I'm talking about my generation and personal experience.
Oh yeah,
yeah. But aside from that issue, it's a matter of I wouldn't really. I mean, I'd be all right with the Chinese just because their birth rates are pathetically low. All you got to do is just tell them, yeah, you're not mixing with us. Stay with your own group, and they'll shrink of our volition, really. So, I want. I mean, I know Steve Lord is very. I know Steve Lord's. I don't think he directly responded to me, but I mean, I can imagine he would disagree with that. But I don't know. I'm just more.
Look, I've got to say, I'm against race mixing in general terms, but I'm less against race mixing with Japanese people or that sort of people. To be honest, I am. But yeah, that's just me. You don't have to agree. It's just what I think.
Yeah, it's I suppose like the nauseating thing was you saw Sikhs in reform, and I go, I'm just we're just gonna have to accept it for the time being, because of course it's like as Jobby would say on Twitter. Like, the thing is, we have to accept people where they are, and yeah, people still think the base Sikh meme. That's where people are at. So you know,
Yeah, I don't go that I don't go that far myself, but you know, I know
I have.
that I don't believe in the basic thing. I don't, to be honest. I really don't. It's
Yeah,
like are the Sikhs the most anti-British of people? Probably not. But should they be in Britain? No, not really. The Punjab is where they belong. So you know.
yeah, and it's. I mean, what's that? I don't know if it happens over here as of yet, but I know in Canada there's that Punjabi bloke who
Oh
is a
yeah,
massive
big
Punjabi
time,
nationalist.
huge. Yeah, huge.
Yeah, he's banned actually from India, I believe, and yet he is a complete progressive in Canada. Which, I mean, just, I mean that should that guy's face should be on a billboard just to say basic meme. Yeah, bollocks to that.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, look, Alabaster is saying in the chat, love them or hate them, Anglo women or your women. Well, first of all, I'd say it was Anglo Celtic women, not just Anglo women. But the other thing I would say is, I like the good ones and I don't like the bad ones. It's as simple as that. There are some good ones, but there are some bloody bad ones. I mean, look at that OnlyFans fot who chucked the milkshake over Farage last week. I mean, she did it just because it would get attention for her OnlyFans, you know?
You know,
And
the
she's
funny
a
thing
single
is,
mother. She's a single mother with an enormously ugly fat ass, who she
what the funny
sold to
thing is,
people for less money than she paid for the milkshake.
yeah, that milkshake cost more than her own bloody sense of self dignity. That's how bad that woman
exactly.
is.
She'll show you her lady bits for less money than she paid for the milkshake she chucked over Farage. Now, could you marry that woman with her kid or kids from other people and have a decent life? No, you couldn't. I'm sorry, you just couldn't, because you never could trust her. She's a sex worker, basically.
Yeah, but I remember reading something like a Twitter thread where it said, "Oh yeah, that French colony of Louisiana. One way they populated that colony was they literally emptied their jails by saying to all the petty thieves and crooks and whatnot. They just said, okay, we'll give you freedom to do whatever you want in North America, as long as you take all the prostitutes with you." So Paris just got cleaned up from all the thieves, crooks, and prostitutes, literally just by expelling them all to Louisiana. So we took a leaf out of our book. We're going. Yeah.
To be fair, there are good white women out there. You know, there are good women like Lady Short, for example, who's a wife and a mother. There are good women like Aubrey, who, although she is American, is a good woman as far as I'm concerned.
There's only one issue, Duke, though. None of them are my age group, are they? Like, I mean, they're good women, but
no, this is true. They
generation.
are a bit older than you, mate. Yeah, I agree. But I think there are younger women that are still okay too.
You really have to look deep. It's like, I'll probably say that I'm not trying to black pill, but it's really, I'm going off for local women near me. It's just, I would not touch them with a barge pole.
But they're not easy, Mitch. I fully agree with you, mate. It's not easy. But there are still good Anglo-Celtic women. But again, I would just say, if someone, because it's so hard to find a good Anglo-Celtic woman who isn't the side of the house, If they were to go off and go with a Japanese girl, for example, I'm not going to chuck them out of the right movement. Not a chance. I'm just not going to do it. You know? So whatever. But that's just me, and people may disagree. You know, it's my own idea. But yeah, there's a load of thoughts these days. There really are a load of thoughts. You know?
Yeah, I was seeing a study earlier that said, so my generation, because for example, right, there's a guy in my local area who's 18 and he's helping me canvass for reform. So that's quite something to look forward to with him, having a conversation with him. However, I also saw that same study that's saying, oh yeah, women are becoming even more left wing. So I'm looking at this and going, what the hell is it going to be like in our time when, like, because there's no way I'm going to form a relationship with a left wing woman who votes Green or Labour. And it's just...
the only thing I would say to you, Mitch, is that if you can find a decent girl, even if she is a bit left wing, and you can convert her gradually to your own point of view. This is what women always do, basically. Like you're not going to find the perfect trad girl.
It's funny because I keep seeing these studies that say women are becoming more left wing, but then, like, because I talked to the Reform canvassing team, and we're just like, we haven't come across many young women who are like massively pro Labour or pro Green or whatever. So I don't know. So it's like I'm not sure what to believe. On one hand, you got the personal anecdotes from people I know in Reform going, "Oh, we actually haven't come across that many women your age, like Zoomer women who are pelting us with milkshakes, or women of that caliber going against us. They've come across young men like my age who are more receptive. Like for example, Reform. I mean, I think Reform could go a lot better on because I mean, they could do more policies that would entice my generation because they're already wanting to get rid of interest on student loans, which that's actually quite a decent policy. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this, but yeah, it's. I don't know, I've got hope for the future in the sense that I think a lot of Zoomer men are salvageable. Like I think I've got hope for the future in that score, but I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a tough one. Like, I mean, generally speaking, women are more verbally left wing than actually spiritually left wing or believing in left wing principles deep down. But it is a tough one. I don't really know where most young women sit sort of politically. I mean, to be honest, the only ones I know just don't have any sort of political priors of any kind. They're nominally like pro-Ukraine and stuff like that, but when it comes to actual policy positions or any actual real world stuff, they just seem to sort of remove themselves from all of that. I mean, all the women in my office, for example, but who are like a mixture of ages, they're all anti-immigration. Like even the ones that claim they're like left wing and vote Labour, they're all still anti-immigration.
Yeah, well said. I do totally agree with that. I think women's political stuff, it mostly is skin deep. You can change it. Mambo Jambo in the chat is saying, Aubrey, you're American. You should read Joseph Ford Cotto's What Happened to America. Fantastic history of the subjugation of Anglo-America.
Is that his most recent one?
I think it is, yeah. And Aubrey, I know because I sent it to her, has actually watched the stream that Cotto did with Academic Agent on that very book. So there you go. I don't know if she's watched it, but I did send it to her. So,
Yeah. No, I did see that stream actually. I was listening. Well, I'm going to sound like I'm trying to shill some some man wipes now. But I was listening to that whilst chopping down a tree. Very manly activity last weekend. but
well done, man.
I didn't finish it, but yeah, I was listening to it, and yeah, because he had Cotter on before. I
you
think
didn't finish the stream, not the tree.
yeah, no, the tree is gone. I didn't finish the stream. But I'm sure he had Joseph Cotto on before, because Cotto's the guy that it was he was. I'm not sure if they still are, but he was very close with Gottfried, wasn't he? Paul Gottfried.
Yeah. They used to have a YouTube channel, and I think they moved it to Twitter, to X, as far as I understand.
Yeah.
But I thought that was a pretty good stream that he did with Cotto. And it's certainly, for someone who's not an American, it explains a lot of what happened to America, like from the time it was founded up until today. It's a stream worth watching, to be honest.
Yeah, I do kind of want to pick that up, to be honest, because I remember Closington, the YouTuber, came over to one of the Skildings events, and he was trying to give a talk on the origins of it. It wasn't the greatest talk. I think you can actually find it here on YouTube. I don't know if he was suffering with jet lag or what, but he kind of struggled a bit to I think put together his argument. But it was still quite an interesting aspect of sort of early Americana and sort of where it was heading and how it's kind of got to where it is now, which we don't actually explore, and does kind of need some serious exploration if you want to understand, sort of functionally how the American empire works.
Yep, totally agree, mate. Totally agree. I also think this is probably true. Having watched a lot of the Cotto Gottfried streams, I think Steve is probably right about that too.
That could have really happened, though, could it? You never could have actually had a landmass as big as America with the sort of destiny and trajectory that it could have had, still tied to Britain, surely.
I'm not sure about that, mate. I think there is a perfectly good chance that if they could have avoided the nonsense that went on in... Look, you probably would have had to have changed British policy prior to 1776, in that Britain ignored America for about 100 years before that, pretty much, until, actually, that's not true. Up until 1757 and the 7 Years' War, Britain very largely ignored America and let them do what they wanted. Had Britain not have done that, then I think you could have avoided 1776, and then America might have turned into something very like Canada or Australia or New Zealand, like a dominion. It could have done,
It's just I kind of think that because it's like people talk about like when the American empire collapses, and I kind of just think that's never going to happen. I think the current regime will collapse, and the power vacuum will be filled very, very quickly. You can't. I just don't think you can have an Anglo diaspora as large as the one that exists in America is, because it's bigger than I think people realize. There's a lot more people of actual British stock in America than people often like to think. You can't have that and that enormous landmass with all those resources, and it just not becoming a dominant superpower every single time over and over again. I don't see that not being the case.
I'll be honest with you, Adam, it's not something I've thought about to a great depth. My thinking tends to go on: could we have got the British Empire in the early 1900s to become more unified? So you go from imperial tariff preference to an imperial parliament, which looks after defense and foreign policy, basically. And like Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and back then South Africa as well, would have sent representatives, like in proportion to their population, to this. And the Imperial Parliament would have basically looked after British Old Commonwealth Empire defense and foreign policy. Could we have done that? Yeah, I think that would have been possible if scum like Churchill hadn't have gone against it. And would that have made a better world? Yes, I think it would have done, because it would have given Britain the ability to contest with continental nations like America and like Russia in the early to mid 20th century. We could have contested with them on a relatively level playing field, bit less, but we had such a big advantage in shipbuilding, for example, that navally we certainly could have not only contested with them, but won. But yeah, people like Churchill didn't want it, But then Churchill was half American, which I think is the key to him in many respects.
Yeah.
Churchill didn't really care about the British people because he was half American. And he was absolutely, he considered his mother, who was little better than an upper class whore, to be honest. He considered her to be some like fairy queen. And she was American. She was an American millionaire's daughter, and a whore. But yeah, I think that's the key to understanding Churchill, and why Churchill is not the greatest British Prime Minister, and why Churchill in World War II was able to, without a second thought, utterly destroy the British Empire for America, because his mum was American, wasn't hard. And I don't think Churchill was an alpha dude at all. I mean, everything I know about him and his wife is that Churchill was no sort of alpha dude whatsoever. Like, his wife was never faithful to him. But yeah, whatever. But he's the greatest British Prime Minister ever. Yeah, well, I don't know what you base that on, unless it's.
What do you think about his writings, though? Because he was generally considered
he was a great English writer, one of the best. Great English writer. He writes great prose, but that's as far as I'll go with Churchill. But
I bought the River War once, but it got lost in the post. That's as close as I've ever got to actually read.
Yeah, the River War is a great book. So is the Malacan Field Force, which was his first book, where he fought on the Northwest Frontier of India. Great book. Yeah. The River War is a great book. His Boer War stuff is less good, because by that stage he was more of a correspondent and not a soldier. But he was also hated by most other British Army officers, Like, when he was going down on the railway that was taking him down to the Nile River to join Kitchener's Field Force before the Battle of the Battle of Omdurman, I beg your pardon, in 1898. The other cavalry officers in his carriage stuffed him under the chair, like the seats in the carriage. They stuffed him under there and kept him there because he was such a prick, And I'm not joking. That's what they did to him. Churchill was not a popular bloke with his own people, even.
Yeah.
And like I said, 1908, I think it was 1908. He was a conservative, but he crossed the floor to join the Liberals because he was against imperial tariff reform. And imperial tariff reform was the last desperate attempt to turn the white Old Commonwealth British Empire into something meaningful with an actual political thing. And I've done streams with Horace and you as well, Alan, about this. And people need to realize this. Look,
and of course, in those streams, we talked about his sort of like particularly overly aggressive stance towards Mussolini's Italy over the question of Abyssinia, and that kind of makes a lot of sense when you think about and the whole sort of like decolonization stuff that started with him and started with some of his speeches and his positions. It makes a lot of sense when you go back and look at his previous crossing of the floor and his previous stances on actual positions of empire when he was before he was prime minister.
Adam, and you and I used to be friends with Brutus, all right? And Brutus has said to me many times, oh, I want to debate you about Churchill. And I've said, look, you can get us a reasonable, like, neutral umpire, somebody like Apostolic Majesty. I'll debate him anytime he likes about Churchill and the British Empire. But you know, he tries to imply that my dislike for Churchill was because I'm some sort of wereaboo, you know. I like Nazi.
To be fair, though, Brutus is a pretty fair conversationalist. So you could probably do that debate unmoderated with him.
Yeah, maybe, but I'm no sort of wereaboo.
No,
Adam, and I'm not. You know, like if you tell me about British Army or the Royal Navy or the Royal Air Force fighting the Germans in World War II, I ain't in favor of the Germans, all right? I'm not. I'm sorry. Because you never blame the warriors, ever.
Yeah.
But we didn't need to be in that fucking war, you know?
Mm.
And the reason we were in that fucking war was to quite a large extent Churchill. But where Brutus gets it wrong is he thinks I only dislike Churchill because of that. And as I pointed out to him on X, on Twitter, no, my dislike of Churchill goes back to 1908 and him crossing the floor over imperial tariff reform, which was an attempt to make the British Empire a real thing, at least in terms of the white dominions.
Mm.
It's got nothing, you know, Adolf Hitler, no one had ever heard of him, and he was a little kid in 1908, you know?
Yeah. He said some base things about Indians, but that's not enough to to rehabilitate all the other shit that he did.
No, you don't. But yeah, look, I'll debate Brutus on Churchill anytime he wants, but I want a reasonable, respected historian, like someone like Apostolic Majesty, to run it. Because Apostolic Majesty is not particularly enormously pro-British. In fact, he's more pro-French, if anything, I'd say. But he does know his history, and he won't allow nonsense. Like he did that debate with AA and Semiagog, and
I have picked up on some of the pro-Catholic coded messaging he has. So I'm onto him.
Yeah, he does. Without a doubt, he does. But I still like him. He's a good dude. You're right, but yeah, Apostolic Majesty is still a good dude. And when it comes to history, he sticks to the history, you know. So yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, but sure, but my objection to Churchill goes way before even World War One. Never mind World War Two. He was terrible in World War One, by the way, for the British. He got more Royal Navy sailors killed in World War One than the Kaiser ever did.
Yeah,
this is the truth, by the way, because of his stupid orders.
Are you thinking about just Gallipoli, or are you including a lot of other?
Oh no! No! Oh, fuck no!
Well, we're going to mention the fact they sent an armoured brigade to Greece and
Coronel,
North African
Islands. I really, Mitch, I was talking about the First World War here, all right, but
Oh, for
the
you
Battle
second one,
of Coronel, where a good British admiral, by the way, was expected to go and engage von Spee's squadron with ships that had no chance of winning. And Churchill basically said, no, you must engage him. And also made sure that the more powerful ships he could have got weren't with him. So, and this admiral was a very good dude, and all his mostly reservist sailors were very good, brave British dudes. And so, yeah, they went and did what they were told, and they all died, and not one of them survived because it was in the South Atlantic and the sea was freezing. Not one single British survivor. That was fucking Churchill. Excuse my language. Bastard. Like, many of them were ex-fishermen and ex-merchant sailor dudes who had served in the Royal Navy earlier in their career. And Admiral Craddock was the British naval officer's name, and he was a very brave and good admiral. And he went down with his ship along with all of his men. And that was Churchill.
There's this little bit of like soundbite boomerism that you sometimes hear, where I think, you know, people will say certain things because they think it makes them sound, I don't know, well read or well learned, and it's actually just like something they've heard from somewhere else. And it's they'll say, oh, you know, Churchill was a great wartime leader, but he wasn't a great like, you know, civil leader. And you kind of sit there and you think, like, surely that's the complete inverse. Like, he was a horrific wartime leader.
My grandfather turned around and told me, and my dad, and my grandfather was in the British Army in between the wars, fought on the northwest frontier of India, joined up again in 1940 when his house was bombed flat by the Luftwaffe. So you could say typical British dude, you know. My grandfather said to me he remembered during the general strike in 26, I think it was 1926, when Churchill said, give me a whip and I'll whip them back to work. Didn't like him at all. He fucking always detested Churchill. But then he also detested Attlee giving India independence in 1947. Because he correctly said that that's going to stop Britain being a great power, isn't it? Which it did. But anyway, you know, not an idiot, my granddad, but I hate Churchill. I think he did more damage to Britain and the British Empire than any other single man. And I include Hitler in that, and Mussolini and Hirohito. None of them did as much damage to the British Empire as Churchill did, who everyone today says is a great British hero. It's bullshit. He wasn't. He might have been a great American hero, but he sure weren't a great British hero. But that's just me.
It's funny, isn't it? Because of all the statues that will get a plaque of historical revisionism under Sadiq Khan in London, they'd never put a plaque on the Churchill statue.
Not a chance.
Covering any of that stuff, or even some of the actual like unintentionally small base things that he did, like wanting to campaign on the slogan, you know, keep Britain white and stuff like that.
Yep, I agree.
You know, they won't actually touch that.
Totally agree, mate.
Fran says, "Can we fit a Lady Diana round on this episode?"
Any final thoughts?
No, we're not touching that.
Lady Diana, she was a whore. But anyway, Mitch, any final thoughts, mate?
Well, aside from what I do, so you know, I'm doing my bit to make sure Zero Siege actually happens as best we get. I'd say to anyone not currently involved in that project, do the best. Like, I mean, I canvass in both. Like, I don't have to worry about conflicts of interest. I've got one constituency where it's SDP I'm helping, and the other one where it's reform. So I've got that. But yeah, I certainly would say, do your bit. Do your bit, as in, like, England expects every man to do his duty.
Nice quote.
We
Nice
must,
quote.
yeah, we must make sure 0 seats actually happens as best as possible for England to have a future.
Totally agree. Anything you'd like to plug, Mitch?
I mean, do I even bother plugging my Twitter just because, as I said, like I might not be as online as I usually would be, just because I'll be spending a lot of time canvassing.
Mitch has a good Twitter. Do go and follow him if you are on X, guys. Adamant, any final thoughts, mate?
No, this we've kind of gone everywhere tonight, and it's been good. But that is it.
I think this has been one of the most hopeful streams we've ever done. It's like there is some light at the end of the tunnel, maybe, if we're lucky.
Yeah, the tunnel was longer than we thought and darker than we thought, and there is a tiny little matchstick of light in the far distance.
100. Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree with you. Right? Is there anything you would like to plug, Adam?
No, and I'm not going to be around either for the next 2 weeks.
Is it secret to ask where you're going for holidays?
I'm going hiking in the Dolomites.
Oh, nice, man. That'll be cool.
Mm.
That'll be cool. I hope you have a good time.
Yeah. It'll be fun. And
good,
it's a little bit. It is a little bit annoying that I'm gonna miss being able to actually play a part on the ground in the first election of my life that's actually had any sort of meaningful import on the outcome.
Walking in the mountains is probably more important for Anglo-European dude, I reckon.
Yeah.
Alabaster in the chat is saying you're going to Ibiza. I've been to Ibiza, mate. It's a terrible fucking place. And I don't think that's where Arman's going.
I will actually spring to the defense of Ibiza. It can be very nice depending on where you go.
I went to what's that island off Ibiza, Adam, and the smaller one that you can go to with a ferry. I'm trying to remember now. I went there and I went to a place called the Black Cat Bar, which was used by Salvador Dali and you know that Spanish Picasso. It was used by Salvador Dali and Picasso. And I went there and I was there with this Scottish girl who was very pretty. She was like a long blonde haired, big tit girl. And they kept buying her drinks. They thought she was German. That was kind of funny. I mean, like the people who ran the bar bought her drinks because they thought she was German. That was kind of funny because it was not that long after Franco. It was many years ago. And that place was all right. I didn't mind that, but I can't say I was a big fan of Ibiza, to be honest. I mean, some fairly pretty countryside, I suppose, but whatever. Anyway, Thank you to my guests this evening, Mitch, Adaman, and AI. 0 seats, gentlemen. 0 seats for the so-called, in air quotes, Conservative Party. That's what we need to work for. And if we can achieve something towards that, who knows? Our situation in Britain may change. In the meantime, all I can say to you is don't let the bastards grind you down.
0 seats. Send my buggers back.
Yeah, well done, Mitch. Well done. And sorry, Adam.
I said re-migration now.
Re-migration now? Yeah, I'm a total re-migration supporter. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Starting with Rishi Sunak. But anyway, guys, we'll see you next week. Never let the bastards grind you down.